guess the idea is to have an aware, there's a phrase, not my phrase, that we have a daily reprieve based on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And spiritual to me doesn't mean like my daughter Jolie went to Nepal, to study yoga, and she sits on a mountain cross-legged for a couple of hours. I'm not going to Nepal, man. It's a little out of my territory. But sometimes it will happen for me. I'll be sitting in my backyard in Amagansett, and I notice a cardinal, a red cardinal. And I could think to myself, look at me, look at me, look at me. I'm noticing a red cardinal. And at that moment, I'm lucky. I'm a lucky man. But I can't bottle that. Especially I live in the village, in Greenwich Village, and so I live on the ninth floor, and I'm late for court, and the elevator stops at the 8th floor. It's not a big building, and it's this woman with her daughter, I know it is, and they're holding the elevator because the woman is taking the daughter to the park, and the daughter is going to bring every toy that anybody ever gave her in a lifetime with her to the park, and the woman is holding the elevator, and there's no consideration of me at all. And of course I'm late. Not a good character trait, but I'm late. And I'm getting angrier and angrier and angrier at this woman holding the elevator door. And then the kid comes in, and she pulls on my jacket, and she says, "Hi, Peter, how you doing?" And it just changed everything, everything, And it gave me my spiritual mojo.
Somehow, I don't know why, reminded. So I'm being thrown out. I'm leaving the seminary, the Franciscan seminary, for the second time. That's a long story, but
you were kicked out of there, right?
First time I was thrown out. Second time I was.
Don't fake it. This is a show of truth on this show.
But I'm sitting with the rector of the seminary, and I said, "I think I have to leave." And he said, "I think you do too." And I said, he said, "But I'd like to know why you think you have to leave." And I said, "I don't believe in God anymore." And he said, "That's a problem of belief." He said, "Some of our greatest saints, St. Paul, St. Augustine, St. Francis, had problems with belief." He said, "They became our greatest saints." He said, "Maybe you're becoming a saint." He said, "I'm not worried about that." He said, "Because you've got faith in your bones." He said, "And it's so clear." He said, and then of course he said, you've got another problem. It's called celibacy, and that's not going to go away. But this notion of faith in our bones, that you see it when people have it. You see it in yourself when you're feeling it. Tolstoy did this enormous investigation. He was the most famous person in the world. He was like Michael Jackson and Barack Obama and whomever all together, because it was when writers were so important. And he's finishing Anna Karenina, perhaps a book that people think is the greatest novel ever written, or one of them. And he says, "This is a waste of time." He said, this is unimportant. He said, "How could I live a life that is," he said, "because what's going to happen is that's a big success, and then I'm going to have another success or failure, and then I'm going to die, and what's the point? And he goes on this journey, and he writes another book called The Confessions. And he gets to this, and he examines all religions and all philosophies and all manner of thought, and he finds them all wanting. And then one day, I forget the exact scene, but he's looking out into the field where there are peasants, and they're delighted.
Where there are what?
Peasants. And they're delighted, and he's thinking, what do they have to be delighted for? I'm the guy with everything, both in, he was a wealthy count, on top of being the world's greatest writer and celebrity and et cetera. And he says that same line as the rector of my seminary. He says, oh, their faith is in their bones. They're not talking theology. They're not talking how many angels can you get on the head of a pin. They're in the field rejoicing about being alive, about being with God, all of that kind of stuff. Then, of course, Tolstoy goes off and starts a religion, which by the time he died had 1 million followers.
What kind of religion?
It's called Tolstoyism.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. As it turns out, Gandhi is a Tolstoyan. Gandhi influences Martin Luther King Jr. In other words, how this all happens is quite remarkable. But this notion of, because Tolstoy says, I'm not writing anymore. The most important thing is that I find a life with God and with people and so on. Anyway, this has been written about a lot, and his problems with his wife. But this idea that we get a certain life in our bones, and that's, again, the great accident.
Cardinal Spellman, little known fact, was a great gambler. Liked to bet on the horses and the ball games and stuff. And my friend John Reynolds, now dead, his father was a bookmaker. So Cardinal Spellman would place his bets with John's father, and he'd lose a lot. And when he'd lose, John's father would tear up the chip. When he won, he got the money. So when he was dying, the father, he told Cardinal Spellman that he was worried about his son, which there was plenty of reason to worry about John Reynolds. John Reynolds was a great character. And would Cardinal Spellman look after him? And the Cardinal said he would. And so he gave John, for no reason but that the father asked, a license to, if you wanted to buy commercial real estate that the church owned in Manhattan, John was one of the guys you got to go through. So John was made for life in terms of his...
There was a lot of building back then.
There was a lot of building.
Yeah.
He would drive around town in a forest green Jaguar, and he had a driver. And when he'd take you to lunch, he couldn't bear that the driver was in the car waiting, so he would always invite the driver
For lunch.
to have lunch with you, you know. And because he would do that, John was a laughing guy.
What about, can you tell the Norman Mailer story in...
The what?
The Norman Mailer story in front of the judge?
Yeah, I represented Norman Mailer in the courtroom, and he was a great character, and he wrote a movie called Once Upon a Time in America, and became a big hit with De Niro, except they didn't use his script, and they wouldn't pay him. Italian guys, Sergio Leone, Grimaldi, and so we tried this case in the courthouse, and not a seat in the courtroom, you can imagine. And every day at about 11:45, Norman will tap me on the shoulder and say, needs a break. And so at first I thought he's got to go to the bathroom, you know. We would ask the judge, and he'd get his break. But after he did it 4 or 5 days in a row, you know, can't be at 11:45 exactly, he has to go to the bathroom. Where the hell is he going? The judge had been a former investigation commissioner, and he was just a tough guy, one of these guys with a leathery face and cigar in his mouth that he wasn't smoking, you know, and you know that he had a fight or two growing up. And he turns to me out of there and he says, look, we're not going to put this on the record. Would you mind telling me why at 11:45 every day you need your break? And man, I said, well, I have 3 wives and 7 children, so I go to the phone and I call my bookmaker. And that's what Norman was doing every day while we were trying the case.
Well,
but what's that got to do with lucky man?
Well, he understood that that luck had a material aspect. That
oh yeah.
You know, he had to get lucky, and you have to go place your bet in order to get lucky. You got to be in it to win it.
When you have the luck, I think you got to polish it and you got to nurture it. I could remember I was going to court and I was dressed in a Savile suit, pinstripe, and half boots, spit shined, and pale blue linen shirt, paisley tie. I really looked good. And Joyce, my wife, said that Baxter, my grandson, had called, and he was hoping that his grandfather would come and watch him pick apples. They live out here all year round. And I said, well, I can't do it. I gotta go. I gotta be in court. And Joyce said, how many times in your life do you think your grandson's going to call and say he wants you to pick apples? So I canceled what I was doing and dressed inappropriately. I went to the Bridgehampton. It was a beautiful farm. And now I'm sitting on a haystack. I'm watching my grandson and the other kids. I don't know how old they are. Call it 12, 13. They're picking apples. And I felt like something was different. I'm like looking around like, what's different about this? And what was different is that I was happy. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting on a haystack, watching my grandson pick apples with the sun shining on my neck, and I'm happy. So I say to the teacher, would it be okay if I took when they go for lunch back at the school, can I drive them? Meaning, don't go on the bus. And she says, sure. And sure enough, the 2 other kids wanted to go. And so now we're in my beat up convertible. For some reason, as long as I can remember, I always had a beat up convertible. And the top is down. Baxter's in the front seat, passenger seat, 2 boys in the back and me. And we're playing Springsteen. And they know the words, which surprises me. And we're singing at the top of our lungs. And I'm happy, man. I mean, I'm happy from my head to my toes. We get to the school. It was the Hayground School out here at Bridgehampton. I don't know who knows it. And they jump out of the car. And when I say jump out of the car, I'm sure I'm wrong. But I don't remember Baxter opening the door of the car. And there's only 2 doors, so how did they all get out? But they jumped out of the car. And after they jump out of the car, Baxter is running. And I don't think he's running because he's late or because he's anxious to get into the school. I think he's running because he's joyous. It's a natural run, man. He's a young guy, and he's not lonely, and he's not scared, and he's not angry. And he's just been picking apples, and now he's running for the next adventure. And I had this mad desire to yell out at him, Baxter, Baxter, don't go, man. Come with your grandfather. We'll go up to Yankee Stadium, watch the Yankees play the Red Sox. Oh, man, don't go. We'll go to Paris. We'll go to Paris, Baxter. I'll teach you about girls, as if I know anything about women. But don't go. And of course I didn't do that because he's got to go. The young people got to go, just like we had to go. And I was empty because I didn't know where to go. Where do you go? I got my Savile Row, and I should say, I come from Brownsville in Brooklyn. I was born in Brownsville. It's a long way from Brownsville to a Savile Row suit in Bridgehampton, about 100,000 miles, I guess, you know? It's a long way, but there I was. I belonged there too, but I didn't know where to go to get the happily ever after card.
You talk about that distance, and one of the most startling conversations of my life. So Carly was a friend of Jackie Onassis, as you know, and so Carly and I first met, Carly set Jackie and I up so that Jackie could give her review of me. Who is this guy, Jim Hart, and do we like him?
What do you think?
Yeah.
Looks like an Irishman from the West End of Long Beach.
Right.
What do you do with this guy?
And you're Carly Simon, and who is this guy that fell off the turnip truck? And so Jackie arrives, the first time I'm meeting her, and Carly disappears. She makes this excuse she has to go up island on Martha's Vineyard, and she's gone for 3 hours. And I'm sitting alone with Jacqueline Onassis. And we have this astounding conversation. And at some point in the conversation, she says, Jim, you've had the most interesting life I've ever heard of. And at first I thought it was a joke. I'm talking to Jacqueline Onassis. I'm the kid from Long Beach.
West End of
Long Beach, the
Irish,
Rockaways.
Irish town.
Right. And this is Jacqueline Onassis. And so first I think she's joking. I said, what? And then I begin to think, is she stupid? You know, how could she say such a thing? I said, could you possibly mean? And she said, I've had a really interesting life, but it's all been in one strata. She said, I was born into privilege, et cetera, and I remained in privilege my whole life. And she said, it's been astounding, but it's one band. She said, you have had Brownsville to Savile Row, that experience you're talking about, and how remarkable that experience is for a person. And how that becomes such an interesting life versus what she was talking about. As I was growing up, of course, I wanted out of that working class world.
Oh, yeah.
Terrible, in a hurry, in a big hurry.
For me, it was Manhattan.
And so,
over the bridge.
Yeah, so I go to the seminary, and now I'm the smart kid in the family. I'm the smart person in the family. I'm a sophomore in high school in the Franciscan seminary. My father didn't get through 7th grade, and I'd come home with a new word. I was a very big reader, and so I'd come home with new words to impress my family with. And inevitably, and I didn't do it consciously, I don't think, but inevitably, I would come home with some word like quotidian. And my father would say, I know big words too. I said, yes. He'd say, delicatessen. You know, and you begin to see, as you look back, the pretensions, the necessary pretensions in order to get away from the world that I wanted to escape. And now, of course, I see the truth of those people, my parents, for example, in a way that I couldn't as I was trying to escape it.
But the irony is that that world that you were escaping from, that world that I left, was some of the most beautiful worlds in the world.
Well,
I
sure.
remember being in Long Beach and seeing Fats Domino. Fats Domino, and he's wearing green pants and a purple shirt, and he's got a pomander, and he's on the piano, outdoors.
This is in one of the beach clubs or something?
No, right in the center of
town.
With a piano, and he's singing, "I'm gonna be a big wheel someday. I'm gonna be somebody," and me thinking, "Me too," you know?
Right.
And now looking back at it, if we were to start telling stories, you know, I don't know if we have time or if we should, but we would go right to Long Beach. Picture, you know, Joyce and I, when we got married, we were much too young to get married. We were 23, and with no money, but we didn't care about that.
Right.
And we had a cottage on a doctor's property on the west end of Long Beach on the bay side, and he used it for his children. So he had a duck. It wasn't very high ceilings, but it was right on the bay. And every morning, Joycey would make a coffee and donuts and go out, and the guys with tugboats and things like that, you know, would come over and she'd give them a cup of coffee. And I'm talking about that like,
Sure.
That's heaven. That's heaven.
You know, my parents had nothing. They literally, I mean, we lived in a basement in a bungalow by the ocean. I guess we had the ocean.
And they had faith.
They had great faith. That's the other part. That's the part that my mother believed. And you know, my father's story is a story of extremes. I mean, he had a horrific problem with alcohol, low-end alcoholic, institutionalized, as he used to say. I never knew quite what it meant. I've been institutionalized more than 55 times in my life. Now, it took me much later, I thought, is that 112 times? Is that 2,000 times? Is that 56 times? In any case, he was in big trouble, big trouble. And then he got sober and his life changed, but slowly changed. And my mother, she had this, again, going back to faith, she had this notion and I don't know exactly where it came from, that life was going to get better. And as grim as our life was, this notion that things were really going to get better, and they did very slowly. So I believed her. I believed her faith because, in fact, maybe we went from the bungalow to when I was 7. Then we ran a funeral parlor in Valley Stream. You know, it didn't get spectacular, but it got a little better than the basement apartment. You know, so in fact it was true. And life, our life, and I don't mean the material life, that happened to get better too. But our emotional, psychological life as a family, loving each other through all of this crazy stuff that we experience, as many families do, always.
I started off for whatever reason talking about luck,
Mm.
and now we're talking about faith, and I'm wondering if that isn't the secret. There's a line in the Paul Simon song that the thought that life could get better is woven indelibly into our genes. I mean,
Well, in that same conversation with Jackie that I had, we talked about, she said, you were in the seminary, or we had the conversation about the seminary, and she said, how was your faith affected when your son got sick?
mm,
And I said, oh, it really affected everything. I couldn't believe that God had done this to me or whatever. And she said, I felt the same way about when Jack was killed. She said, I couldn't believe like I had believed before. And then she said, and how do you feel now? And I said, I so wish I had the faith that I had before. And she said, oh, God, so do I. And of course, in the conversation, in the moment of the conversation, just like we're having now, we had faith. We had it in that moment, remembering the experiences of our life and feeling again how we would form a friendship and have as much faith as we could with each other.
mm-hmm.
And so and for me, that's one of the reasons that my Catholic background is so important to me, even though I'm not a churchgoer and not a religionist, but the memories of my emotional connection through that institution are very significant. They give me even yet, and sometimes more now than ever before, they give me an optimism that I could feel those ways in that belief system, whether I have that belief or not, means it's in me, it's in you, it's in all of us in a certain way, not to be Pollyannish about it, because we also have other times.
You talked about Jacqueline Kennedy. Is my belief that the Kennedy era, I don't think he accomplished very much as the President of the United States, but there was a feeling in the country. There was a feeling of joyousness, not just the rich people, right, or just the poor people who had faith. There was a feeling that it was just great. It was great to be an American. It was great to be alive. It was great to have faith in ourselves.